going to finish off our series on Judges. And actually going to finish off with probably the best known story in the book of Judges. One of my favorites, kind of. It really doesn't have necessarily a hero to the story. It's got a bit of an anti-hero. And the version that we learned in Sunday school didn't quite tell the truth, or at least the full story. So it's the story of Samson. And if you kind of remembered that, you probably think of two things: hair and Delilah. We're going to start just a little earlier than that. Samson, there's two characters that I actually connect with the story of Samson. Samson was born to a woman who was trouble having children. And so she went to the priest and said, listen, I want a child. I haven't had a child. Can you pray for me? And I think the priest actually thought she was kind of drunk at the time, so don't think he took her seriously at first, but eventually he did, and they prayed. And an angel came and told Samson's mother that he would have a child, and that this child would be dedicated to God. The other story that kind of connects with me with this is in the New Testament, and it's the story of John the Baptist, because he starts off the same way. In his case, mom and dad are very old. They haven't been able to have any children. They've been praying for a child. Nothing's been coming. They've kind of given up. Zechariah, John's father, goes into the temple, and he is serving his time in the temple, and an angel comes to him and says, Elizabeth's going to have a child. And so both of these men are prophesied. Both are going to be special. And that is where the similarity ends. For John the Baptist, he goes on to lead a life that is exemplary. He becomes the Elijah that is, coming with the blessing that the Messiah is on his way. And so he spends his life doing this preaching and baptizing people and reminding them that the Messiah is coming, in fact, that he is here. Samson spends the rest of his life basically serving Samson. Very selfish. He really doesn't go out and do anything great for God. He just kind of exists and does whatever Samson wants to do. So let's read some of the story. It's kind of a bit of a long passage. Hope you'll forgive me, but we'll go into this a little bit deeper a little later. So here it is. It's from Judges chapter 16, starting to read with verse 4. Sometime later, he fell in love with a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. The rulers of the Philistines went to her and said, see if you can lure him into showing you the secret of his great strength and how we can overpower him, so we may tie him up and subdue him. Each one of us will give you 1,100 shekels of silver. So Delilah said to Samson, tell me the secret of your great strength and how you can be tied up and subdued. Samson answered her, if anyone ties me with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried, I'll become as weak as any other man. Try not to be offended, men. You're weak. At least according to Samson. Then the rulers of the Philistines brought her 7 fresh bowstrings that had not been dried, and she tied him with them. With the men hidden in the room, she called to him, Samson, the Philistines are on you. But he snapped the bowstrings as easily as a piece of string snaps when it comes close to a flame. So the secret of his strength was not discovered. Then Delilah said to Samson, "You have made a fool of me. You lied to me. Come now, tell me how you can be tied." And he said, "If anyone ties me securely with new ropes that have never been used, I'll become as weak as any other man." So Delilah took new ropes and and tied him with them. And then, with the men hidden in the room, she called to him, "Samson, the Philistines are on you!" But he snapped the ropes off his arms as if they were threads. Delilah said to Samson, "All this time you have been making a fool of me and lying to me. Tell me how you can be tied." He replied, "If you weave the 7 braids of my head into a fabric on the loom and tighten it with a pin, I'll become as weak as any other man." So while he was sleeping, Delilah took 7 braids of his head and wove them into a fabric and tightened it with the pin. Again, she called to Samson, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." And he woke up from his sleep and he pulled up the pin and the loom with the fabric. Then she said to him, "How can you say I love you?" Feeling the guilt, guys? How can you say I love you when you won't confide in me? This is the 3rd time you have made a fool of me and haven't told me the secret of your great strength. With such nagging, she prodded him day after day until he was sick to death of it. So he told her everything. "No razor has ever been used on my head," he said, "because I have been a Nazirite dedicated to God from my mother's womb. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me, and I would become as weak as any other man." When Delilah saw that he had told her everything, she sent word to the rulers of the Philistines, "Come back once more. He has told me everything." So the rulers of the Philistines returned with the silver in their hands. After putting him to sleep on her lap, she called for someone to shave off the 7 braids of his hair, and so began to subdue him, and his strength left him. Then she called, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." He woke from his sleep and thought, "I'll go out as before and shake myself free." But he did not know that the Lord had left him. Then the Philistines seized him, gouged out his eyes, and took him down to Gaza. Binding him with bronze shackles, they set him to grinding grain in the prison. That first blank is just simply the secret. So there's basically the story. There's a couple of misconceptions that we often have about the story of Samson. The first is said in a joke. Who shaved off Samson's hair? The answer often is Delilah, but the answer really is Delilah called someone else to do it. The more important misconception is what was the source of Samson's strength? And the answer we often say to that is his hair. But that's not true either. The source of his strength was not his hair. But beyond that, what would you say? Guys, somebody comes up to you and say, "Oh, you are so strong. Tell me the secret of your strength." And what would you say? "Oh, I work out once or twice a year or decade. Comes from the Lord." Yes. All of our strength comes from God. Samson probably didn't have that all kind of figured out. So here's the story again. He meets Delilah. Delilah gets bribed. She comes in with Samson and some Philistines hiding in the background, and says, "What's the secret of your strength?" And he concocts this story. 7 new bowstrings. Tie me with that, everything will be fine. He snaps them. So she comes back like, "Oh, Samson, you made a fool of me. What's the secret?" And Samson, "Oh, well, it's, 7, or it's new ropes. Tie me up with new ropes. Everything will be fine. I'll be as weak as anybody else." She ties him up with these new ropes, and he snaps them. "Oh, Samson, what's the real, reason for your strength?" "Oh, if you take my 7 braids and you weave them into a fabric and put a pin in, I'll become as weak as any man." And so he falls asleep, and she weaves his hair together into a fabric and puts a pin in, and then says, "Samson, the Philistines are on you." And he wakes up and pulls everything out, and he's still as strong as ever. A couple things we should probably figure about Samson, and one of them is, man, this guy sleeps deep. I'm not sure anybody could do that. Well, of course, don't know what luck you'd have of, trying to make my hair into a fabric, but, this guy must have slept deep. But the other thing is, Samson, are you stupid? Samson, what's the real answer to your strength? Well, my hair has never been cut. Now, if this was even the first time you'd ever read this story, is there any doubt of what happens next? Delilah is going to cut or have somebody else cut. If Samson really thought that his hair was the source of his strength, he would never have told Delilah that. But the truth is that Samson thinks that the secret of his strength is Samson. He goes out once or twice a week and beats up some Philistines with a donkey's jaw. This is the source of his strength. What in the world, Delilah, are you talking about? Samson is the source of his own strength. There is no magic incantation that's going to, take him from being Samson, the strong man, to being a weak person. So he says, "Go ahead, cut off my hair." Even that's not going to do it. Except that his hair was a symbol of his connection with God. And God was his strength. And so when Samson took his relationship with God not very seriously, when he came to Delilah and said, "Listen, cut off my hair, everything will be okay. I'm still going to be strong." God said, "You know what? Maybe it's time. You don't value me? Maybe I should just let you see what things are like all by yourself." That's exactly what happens. He takes God for granted, and God says, "Okay, I'll let you go. Don't want to, but I will let you go." Probably a lesson that a lot of us could learn a little bit from. God, what is it you want from me? Let me read another verse. "But the hair on his head began to grow again after it had been shaved." The blank is an unusual hope. "But the hair on his head began to grow again after it had been shaved." Now that is a miracle. That you could shave somebody's head and that the hair would begin to grow again. About I don't know, it seems like a long time ago, probably 20 years ago, I was in a youth function and we were trying to raise money for missions. And we had this, goal that if we could raise $500 for missions, that the leader of the youth, the district youth would get his head shaved. We had a hairdresser there ready to do it. If we could get, $500, then this guy was going to lose his hair. I thought once you shaved off a guy's hair that it stayed off forever. Actually, what really surprised me was after we shaved off his hair, some of the kids started to, hey, I'll have my head shaved if we raise $50 for missions. And I'm going, what? Oh yeah, I'll do it too. I'll do it. We're shaving all these 14-year-old male heads. And I'm going, man, are we going to get in trouble when these guys go home? Because they're all going home with a lot less hair than they came with. We had one girl, I still remember her. She was, I don't know, not very smart. I don't mean that. She said, if you can raise another $80 for missions, there's 350 kids there. If you can raise another $80 for missions, I'll shave my head. And I'm going, hold it. We're going to send a girl back bald? And, $80 among that crowd, it was like, it took us 2 minutes. We had the $80, and she was going to get her head shaved. And I went to the hairdresser and said, we cannot shave this girl's head. It's bad enough we're shaving the guys' heads. We can't shave this girl's head. And so she volunteered. The hairdresser said, we'll do an undercut. So basically, she had long hair, and they just lifted up her hair and kind of shaved it at the back under, and then her hair would, fall down and hide it. But she got some hair cut off them. I thought these kids were going to be bald for the rest of their lives. In fact, a friend of mine, because at the time I had long hair, and a friend of mine, they started to call for me to have my head shaved. And I can remember a friend of mine walked up and said, sorry, Garry and I are both associate pastors, and we could not get our head shaved without approval of our boss. Which was not probably true, but it got us out of getting our heads shaved. You mean that's not true? It grows back? It grows back? I have in the past called, there's many genres in the Bible. There's letters, there's stories, there's adventures, lots of genres. I've called this the genre of stupid. Of course his hair is going to grow back. I get that. And Mark's right. There's no guarantee once you reach a certain age whether your hair grows up back. But I'll tell you what. Argue with me if you want, but the hair in your ears are still growing. You have to fight, the hair in your nostrils are still growing. Yeah, there's still hair growing. It grows. We can shave it all off, but somewhere the hair is going to grow. So what in the world is Judges 16:22 trying to tell us? Well, I think this is it. Regardless of what you've done, regardless of where you are, God has not given up on you. There's still hope. It's an unusual hope, but there's still hope. You can't run far enough to get away from God. He loves you. He wants to bring you back. He wants to bring to fruition whatever it is that He has ordained for your life. And He's willing to do whatever it takes to let that be done. So, Samson does everything that he can to go against the will of God, and yet his hair continues to grow, and God is still there. Samson said to the servant who held his hand, "Put me where I can feel the pillars that support the temple so that I may lean against them." Now the temple was crowded with men and women. All of the rulers of the Philistines were there. And on the roof were about 3,000 men and women watching Samson perform. Then Samson prayed to the Lord, Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just once more, and let me, with one blow, get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes. Then Samson reached toward the 2 central pillars on which the temple stood. Bracing himself against them, his right hand on one and his left on the other, Samson said, let me die with the Philistines. And then he pushed with all of his might, and down came the temple on the rulers and all the people in it. Thus he killed many more when he died than when he lived. And that last blank is Samson didn't get it. He was closer, but he still didn't quite get it. Please, God, strengthen me just once more, and let me with one blow get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes. It's still not about God. It's about Samson. All of his life he's lived just trying to please Samson. So I was reading this passage this week. I thought of John the Baptist again, and John, coming to the end of his life, he had been preaching that the Messiah was coming. He had been telling people that they needed to repent and get baptized because the Messiah was coming. And he gets to the end of his life, and he calls a couple of his disciples to him and says, go see Jesus and ask him a question. Are you the one? Or is there someone else? John the Baptist basically saying, listen, I've dedicated my life to this idea. Go and see Jesus and ask him, are you the one? You probably remember the story as the disciples come to Jesus, and they come with John's question. And Jesus says, go back to John and tell him, the deaf hear, the blind receive their sight, the lame leap for joy. He hasn't wasted his life. I'm the one. Samson never got there. Instead of being a hero, he becomes a bit of a sad anti-hero. Although God was able to work through his life. Even though he didn't get it. I believe a couple things for us here at VantagePoint. The first is this. God has placed us here for a reason. The set of conditions and miracles that happened when we first started to meet here were too complex to say that happened by accident. God, I believe, has placed us here. He has placed us here with a mission to do something. Not just inside this building, but in this neighborhood, in this community. He has brought us here for a reason. The second thing that I believe is that he has placed in us all of the giftings that we need to fulfill that task. We're here. We don't have all the same giftings. We're different. But we have together what we need to make a difference in this area. If we are willing. If we want to. The question is, what are you doing with your everything? Samson wasted it. He could have done so much more than he did. But instead, he just simply served Samson. John spent his life proclaiming that the Messiah was coming. Right up until the day that he died, he made the most of every minute that God had given him to proclaim the message that the Messiah was coming. Two men, the different outcome. Pastor Jerry and I got together this week and talked a little bit about a few things. And one of them was just simply a spiritual gifts course that he would like to run, or we would like to run. And so let me plant a seed. If you don't know your gifting, or even if you're just not sure, maybe that would be a good time just to come together and learn from Jerry and to figure out what our gifts are, so that we know what it is that God has placed us here to do. So make plans to be part of that. Maybe tell Jerry that you want to be a part of that. But we really have been made for more. Remember that song? I wasn't made to be tending a grave. I was called by name, born and raised back to life again. I was made for more. So why would I make a bed in my shame when a fountain of grace is running my way? I know I am yours, and I was made for more. I believe that. I believe that God has a purpose for you. Not only does he have a purpose, but regardless of where it is that you are right now, wherever you find yourself, whatever you feel you've done or haven't done, or whatever that story is, God is still clinging for a purpose in your life. Your hair is growing, even if it is just the hair in your ears. He's made you for more. He's made you for a purpose. And all we have to do is make sure that we understand that God has been asking us for everything so that his kingdom can be grown. Let me pray. Father, my hope is that we can be more like John the Baptist than Samson. Yes, God, you blessed him. Yes, God, he got some things done for you, defending your people. But you had given him so much. He could have done so much more. And God, help us not to make that mistake. Help us to understand, regardless of where we are, that you love us. That your purpose and your blessing is on our lives. That you are calling us to walk with him and make a difference in this community. Help us, God, to give you our lives. To give you everything that is us, so that your purpose can be achieved. We thank you. We praise you and we love you. In the name of Jesus, amen.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Whoa, I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. can see you now. I can see the love in your eyes, raising yourself down, raising up the broken.